What if I told you right now that everything you believed while studying the history of the Wild West is nothing but a beautiful illusion? We are often told about large-scale battles and the solemn signing of peace treaties, but the damp autumn of 1889 hides a completely different secret. The story of one incredibly quiet, almost imperceptible departure that forever and irrevocably brought an entire great era to a close. New ruthless times had come to the endless lands of the Great Plains. It was a tragedy not of a single individual, but of an entire people, whose centuries-old kinship ties, rich culture, and inseparable relationship with nature were forcibly confined within the cramped, stifling boundaries of reservations. New draconian laws sought to shatter their inner unity, permanently banning the very traditions that made these people truly free. And it was then that a young hunter made the desperate decision to step beyond these artificial boundaries. He was fully aware of the gravity and inevitability of the consequences of his action. But this was not merely the rebellion of a lone individual. His act reflected, like a mirror, the unyielding will, collective memory, and pain of all his fellow tribesmen. He carried within him the spirit of an entire nation that refused to vanish without a trace. Be sure to watch this video all the way to the very last second, because today we're not just presenting a dry summary of facts, but a living, continuous history of an entire people. You'll learn how this journey, which at first glance seems solitary, became the most powerful and final symbol of freedom for thousands of people. And closer to the middle of the video, I'll reveal one striking detail that this hunter left for his tribe before he left. From that moment on, you're guaranteed to get goosebumps. Are you ready to learn the truth about life in those days? The fall of 1889 brought profound changes to the lands of the Lakota. The new reservation boundaries permanently cut people off from their traditional migration routes. The law strictly forbade leaving the designated territory for the sake of their ancient way of life. The life of a vast people found itself confined within strict, invisible boundaries. People tried to get used to the new way of life on the limited land. Experienced elders told long stories of bygone days by the evening campfires. These legends preserved the unbreakable bond of the entire community with their fading past. Daily life now depended entirely on the meager rations provided. Every member of the tribe learned to survive under conditions dictated by foreign rules. The young hunter watched these changes with a heavy heart. For centuries, his ancestors had roamed freely across these endless plains. Now, however, the horizon seemed an unreachable line behind a solid wall of prohibitions. The wind carried with it the cold sense of withering grass and the approaching winter. Every gust served as a reminder of the days when the great autumn migration began. His skills were no longer of use in this new, confined reality. He could read tracks on dry ground better than many of his peers. His hands were accustomed to holding a sturdy bow and crafting smooth arrows. Now these items lay peacefully in a corner of his modest dwelling. The culture of the people was changing, transforming from action into mere memories. Lakota society had always been built on close mutual aid and shared endeavors. In the past, the return of the hunters meant a feast and plenty for all families. Now the communities gathered only to distribute government rations. This was destroying the centuries-old bonds that had united people into a single, powerful entity. The young man saw the fire in his fellow tribesmen's eyes fade away. The surrounding lands had changed beyond recognition in just a few short years. Where once the sea of tall grass had rustled, smooth fences now stood. The endless prairies were crisscrossed with ruts from the settlers' heavy wooden wagons. The hills he had known since childhood now seemed foreign and unwelcoming. Nature itself seemed to have turned its back on those who knew it best. At night, the hunter would gaze for a long time at the bright stars above the sleeping camp. He recalled the ancient routes leading to the distant northern foothills. In his memory lived maps of valleys hidden beyond the horizon. This knowledge had been passed down in his family for many generations. Now it threatened to disappear forever along with him. In mid-autumn, another strict decree was issued by the reservation overseers. Any crossing of the established boundaries was punishable by imprisonment and ration cuts. This rule finally dashed any hopes of preserving the ancient traditions. The people accepted this news with silent and resigned resignation. Only one man decided to act differently on that cold night. He began preparing his gear in complete darkness and silence. The hunter gathered warm clothes made from thick hides many years ago. He checked the tension of his bowstring and the sharpness of his bone arrowheads. Every movement was measured, precise, and devoid of the slightest doubt. He was about to perform an act that would unite him with past generations. His decision was not a protest against specific new rules. It was a sincere desire to reconnect with the spirit of his people. We'd love to hear your perspective on this complex situation. Do you agree with the hero's arguments and motivations? Share your thoughts in the comments and be sure to subscribe to our channel. I will reveal the best-kept secret of that quiet night. The camp slept soundly under the heavy blanket of cold autumn clouds. The hunter glided silently between the conical dwellings, like a light shadow. He did not want to attract the slightest attention from the guards. Every step he took on the dry ground was measured down to the millimeter. His path led to the edge of the settlement, where his mother's dwelling was located. For many years, the woman had kept the warmth of their family hearth alive. She had taught him to respect the earth and understand the whisper of the steppe wind. The hunter stopped at the entrance, hesitating to pull back the thick curtain right away. His heart beat steadily, but an aching emptiness was growing in his chest. He quietly stepped inside, trying not to wake the sleeping elderly woman. In the dim light of the smoldering embers, he made out her peaceful face. The hunter carefully placed his best hunting knife beside her. This gesture spoke volumes, expressing thousands of long words of gratitude and boundless love. He knew she would understand the meaning of this act in the morning. His mother suddenly opened her eyes and looked at her grown son. There was neither fear nor any attempt to stop him in her gaze. She nodded slowly, accepting his final and irrevocable choice. All the wisdom of their ancient people was reflected in that simple movement. The farewell took place in absolute silence, without a single sound. Stepping outside, he made his way to the corral where his faithful companion stood. The hunter chose the best horse, one capable of enduring long journeys. With practiced movements, he secured a simple leather saddle on the animal's back. The man and his mount understood each other without a word. They were ready to disappear into the darkness of the endless autumn night. Reservation guards patrolled the borders with lit oil lanterns. The hunter knew their patrol schedule down to the minute. He chose the moment when the patrolman disappeared behind a distant hill. With a quick stride, he crossed the imaginary line separating him from freedom. Now there was no going back to his former, predictable life. The night air outside the camp tasted completely different. It smelled of freedom, wormwood, and distant snow-capped mountain peaks. The hunter took a deep breath, filling his lungs with this long-forgotten, beautiful scent. He directed his companion northwest, away from the settlements. Hundreds of miles of empty, cold land lay ahead. By morning, they were already a considerable distance from the reservation. The terrain around them had become more rugged, covered with small ravines. The hunter tried to move across the hard, rocky ground. This left no noticeable tracks for any potential early pursuers. He used all the knowledge passed down to him by previous generations. The sun slowly rose above the horizon, illuminating the scorched prairie. For the first time in many months, he found himself completely alone in nature. There were no fences, no guards, and no foreign structures around him. Just him, his faithful companion, and the endless gray sky. This was precisely the state of being for which he had made his escape. His mind was calm, despite the complexity of the situation. He knew that harsh climatic trials lay ahead. His food supplies would last only a few days if he traveled sparingly. What do you think was driving him at that moment? In the next chapter, you'll learn what trials he faced on the prairie. The hidden truth that everyone keeps silent lies in the landscapes of these places. The plains greeted the lone hunter with a cold wind that pierced him to the bone. Autumn in these harsh lands always arrived with incredible speed. In just a few days, it mercilessly transformed all the familiar colors of the landscape. The tall steppe grass had completely dried out and taken on a pale yellowish hue. The sparse shrubs had finally shed their leaves, exposing their twisted gray branches to the approaching winter. The hunter gazed intently at the endless horizon in search of long familiar landmarks. Once, these boundless expanses had been literally teeming with life and constant movement. Huge herds of mighty bison regularly crossed these fertile green valleys. The great animals always left behind wide, deeply trodden trails. Now, however, only a ringing, terrifying emptiness stretched out before the Indians' eyes. The land seemed dead, completely stripped of its main living symbol, now gone. The disappearance of the bison was a true tragedy for all the indigenous peoples of this continent. For centuries, their entire culture and physical survival had revolved around these massive animals. The meat provided sustenance, and the thick hides were used to make warm clothing and build sturdy dwellings. The bones were used to make durable tools and reliable weapons for new hunts. White settlers destroyed this centuries-old harmony in just a few short and brutal decades. Now the once rich pastures stood completely empty under the gray autumn sky. He stubbornly pressed forward, carefully examining every square meter of dry ground. His keen eyes scanned for the distinctive hoof prints along the dried-up, winding streams. He closely inspected the trunks of the few remaining trees for deep gouges from antlers. In the past, such obvious signs could easily be found at every turn. Wild bison always left numerous traces of their presence in the wilderness. Now, however, nature seems to have erased every last trace of those great herds forever. The silence was broken only by the monotonous whistling of the north wind through the dry grass stalks. Even the birds had abandoned these desolate places, flying far away to the warm south. The hunter often felt like the last living person on this entire vast planet, but he knew for certain that he must continue his lonely and arduous search. It was a matter of personal honor and a tribute of deep respect for the traditions of his ancestors. The great spirit of the boundless plains demanded precisely this kind of unyielding resolve from him. During the day, he would make brief stops in deep, inconspicuous earthen ravines. This allowed him to reliably hide his figure from casual glances from the neighboring hills. He would build a tiny fire from dry wormwood to provide minimal warmth for his frozen hands. Such a weak fire did not produce a tall column of smoke capable of revealing his location to enemies. Military patrols of the new regime still regularly scoured these deserted territories. Safety and maximum stealth had become his top priorities on this dangerous journey. During his brief rest, he constantly recalled his grandfather's old stories. His grandfather had described the routes of the autumn migrations and the traditional resting places in incredible detail. The hunter desperately tried to reconcile these stories with the harsh reality that had changed so drastically. Many ancient landmarks had vanished forever, washed away by the relentless passage of time and the new greedy masters of the land. The familiar hills were now roughly dug up to make way for the iron horses. He had to rely solely on his animal instincts and his wealth of personal experience. The old man often said that animals always return to their native watering holes. This valuable wisdom had been passed down from father to son for generations around the evening tribal campfires. The hunter believed these words sacredly and planned his complex route based on them. He tried to think like a wild animal, anticipating its possible instinctive hidden trails. For centuries, experienced Native Americans had been able to read the minds of their prey better than their own. This ancient skill was the only reliable compass on his long, solitary journey. His long journey lay toward the rocky hills on the distant northwestern border. There lay ancient secret springs of pure water, known only to the indigenous peoples. He sincerely hoped to find at least some signs of a past rich life there. Every kilometer he covered was incredibly difficult due to his mounting physical exhaustion. His legs constantly throbbed from the intense strain on the uneven, hard surface of the parched earth. Yet his strong spirit remained absolutely unyielding in the face of all these harsh hardships. The nights on the open plains were growing longer and significantly colder. The ground cooled very quickly after sunset, becoming thickly covered with a thin layer of crisp frost. The hunter wrapped himself tightly in his old bison hide, trying to preserve what little warmth remained. He slept in short bursts, alert to the slightest rustle in the surrounding darkness. Any crack of a twig could signal the sudden approach of a hungry predator or an armed stranger. His hearing was sharpened to an incredible degree in this ringing and extremely unsettling silence of the steppe. To keep from freezing while asleep, he used a time-tested ancient trick of his wise ancestors. The hunter dug a shallow pit and placed flat stones heated over a fire inside it. On top, he piled a thick layer of earth and dry grass, creating a natural warm bed. This simple invention allowed him to safely hold out until the first saving rays of the morning sun. Upon waking, he felt a severe stiffness in all his joints, but he stubbornly kept moving forward. The desire to find the cherished truth warmed him from within, far better than any bright flame. On the third long day of his journey, he stumbled upon a deep, dry ravine quite by accident. A careful examination of the rocky bottom revealed old, almost completely worn-away tracks of a large ungulate. The exhausted hunter's heart began to beat much faster at this unexpected and long-awaited rare find. This was the first real proof that he was heading in the right direction. The tracks stubbornly led straight north, toward the rocky and very cold foothills. He made a firm decision to follow this ghostly sign of the great past without fail. This grueling journey was far from a mere search for sustenance. It was a kind of sacred pilgrimage through the sites of the former military glory of his great ancestors. Every new step on this hard ground strengthened his unbreakable bond with the history of his people. It was as if he were reliving the vivid destinies of thousands of his brave and free kinsmen. The memory of them lived forever in his heart and gave immense meaning to this arduous trial. If you like this video, be sure to give it a like. The hidden code that changes everything was encoded in these tracks. The hunter began a methodical and extremely cautious pursuit of his invisible, distant target. He moved very slowly, trying not to accidentally destroy the fragile prints on the hard ground. The dry autumn soil preserved fine details extremely poorly, turning the reading of tracks into a true art. He had to pay close attention to broken dry blades of grass and barely noticeable shifts in stones. Only an experienced eye could catch this subtle trail left by a heavy wild beast. The tracks led confidently deep into the harsh territory, which had long been considered completely deserted. The hunter understood perfectly well that the chance of encountering a living target was now practically zero. A lone bison could not survive for long, separated from the protection of its huge herd. Yet the man continued to press forward, driven by an inner and utterly inexplicable sense of duty. It was a pursuit of the very spirit of the bygone golden age of the great endless plains. He faithfully followed the phantom that symbolized the lost freedom of his brave ancestors. His people sincerely believed that every wild animal possessed its own immortal soul. To find this last beast meant to show the highest degree of reverence for all of nature's past glory. The Indian had absolutely no intention of killing this sacred creature for the sake of a mere piece of tough meat. It was vitally important for him simply to see it with his own eyes and confirm its reality. This momentous encounter was meant to be a sign that hope for a revival still existed. Otherwise, his entire life would finally turn into a meaningless wait for an inevitable and sorrowful end. His faithful four-legged companion walked obediently and quietly right beside him, conserving his modest strength. The intelligent animal instinctively sensed the man's extreme tension and tried not to make any unnecessary loud noises. They had long since become a single living mechanism, perfectly attuned to performing an incredibly complex task. Man in the harsh wilderness had once again found that very great and forever lost harmony. The horse stepped with the utmost gentleness, carefully avoiding dry, crunching branches and dangerous deep crevices. This silent spiritual unity gave the hunter entirely new strength to continue the arduous journey. The faithful horse was as much an integral part of these steps as the experienced rider himself. The breed of these hardy Mustangs had been forged in the harsh conditions of a constant shortage of fresh water and food. They were distinguished by incredible strength and could cover enormous distances without a long, restorative rest. The hunter often gently stroked his companion's coarse mane, expressing his deep, sincere gratitude. Without this reliable support, he would have long since collapsed from mounting physical exhaustion. Their bond was far stronger than any iron chain that had once shackled their once free lands. The direction of the treacherous north wind kept shifting, carrying with it the dry scent of dust. The hunter would periodically stop at high points, close his eyes, and breathe in the cold air deeply. He was desperately trying to catch the distinctive musky animal scent of his longed-for distant target. This thick, pungent scent had been familiar to him since his earliest, carefree childhood. Back then, the clean air around the Indian encampments was literally saturated with the presence of their great horned neighbors. But now the harsh steppe wind brought only a dead emptiness and the icy breath of the approaching winter. The terrain gradually became increasingly hilly and extremely difficult for a tired horse to traverse. Deep, narrow canyons appeared along the way, with steep and dangerous rocky, crumbling slopes. The tracks of the hunted animal were very often lost on the hard, rocky surface of these amazing natural formations. The hunter had to spend long hours finding the right and safe path again. He literally crawled on his knees, meticulously examining the slightest hoof scratches on the smooth rocks. His incredible inner tenacity knew no bounds on this strange and dangerous solo expedition. Every descent into such a canyon posed a very serious threat to the lives of both travelers. A single misstep could instantly lead to a fall into a deep and utterly gloomy abyss. The rocks crumbled treacherously beneath their feet, creating a loud, rumbling echo that startled the rare small birds. At the bottom of these damp gorges, it was dark, and the air temperature dropped sharply by several degrees. But it was precisely here, far from the sunlight, that the precious hoof prints were preserved much better. The thick shade reliably protected the tracks from the destructive effects of the scorching daylight and severe erosion. The supplies of simple food taken from his home were rapidly and inexorably running out. The man had switched to the strictest of rations, consuming only the bare minimum of dried meat necessary for survival. Severe hunger began to dull his usual physical sensations, but paradoxically sharpened his spiritual perception of reality. The hunter quickly learned to ignore the growing discomfort, focusing entirely and completely on his task. His weary mind became crystal clear and pure, like a cold, rushing mountain stream. The weakness of his exhausted body was successfully offset by the incredible power of his awakened, strong inner spirit. From a very young age, brave Native American warriors trained themselves to endure long periods of forced starvation. This was a critically important part of preparing the body for the possible harsh trials of hunting or a major war. Therefore, a completely empty stomach did not cause him to panic, but merely put him into a state of light trance. In this unusual state, the invisible boundaries between the real world and the spirit world became very thin. He began to feel as though he could clearly hear the heavy footsteps of a great herd somewhere far beyond the horizon. These vivid visions gave him a faint hope and compelled him to stubbornly drag his bloodied, weary legs forward. On the fifth exhausting day of the pursuit, he finally found the site of an old animal lair. The heavily trampled dry grass clearly indicated that a very large creature had rested here for a long time. However, the edges of these tracks had long since been washed away by the strong, prolonged, cold autumn rains. This clearly meant that the long-awaited target had passed through here many weeks or even long months ago. The beast was far ahead, completely out of reach for the exhausted pursuer and his weary, faithful horse. But even this bitter and belated discovery did not cause the proud Indian to turn back in cowardice. He continued to trudge forward monotonously, turning the arduous search itself into the very meaning of his existence. The hunter understood crystal clear that his distant target had become nothing more than a beautiful illusion. But this phantom illusion was far more real to him than a humiliating life on a cramped reservation. He sincerely preferred to faithfully follow the ghost of former greatness rather than blindly submit to the harsh laws of others. Could he have foreseen the consequences of this decision? In the next chapter, you will learn how the weather on the plains changed abruptly. The weather on the plains began to change rapidly and irrevocably. Heavy leaden clouds completely obscured the entire visible expanse of the sky. Sunlight no longer penetrated this dense gray veil. The air temperature dropped sharply, encasing the ground in a solid crust of frost. True winter was approaching, cruel and unforgiving of mistakes. The hunter took some extra warm clothing from his meager supplies. He wrapped his legs in thick strips of soft, durable leather. This was meant to protect him from frostbite during long treks. His mount also needed rest and shelter from the wind. He tried to choose routes through the lowlands, where the wind didn't blow as strongly. The first sparse snowflakes began to fall slowly onto the dry grass. At first, they melted upon contact with the ground, leaving no trace. However, soon the ground cooled completely, and the snow began to accumulate. A thin white blanket transformed the landscape beyond recognition. Navigating by familiar landmarks became an incredibly difficult task. The snow completely concealed all the old tracks he had been following. Pursuing the phantom under these new conditions had lost all practical meaning. Now the hunter's main task was simple physical survival. He needed to find reliable shelter before a heavy blizzard set in. The experience of his ancestors told him to seek protection in deep, wooded ravines. He headed toward a strip of sparse shrubbery visible in the distance. The trees there grew more densely, creating a natural barrier against the icy wind. The hunter dismounted and led his companion by the reins. Walking through the deep snow became more difficult with every step. Strength was gradually leaving his body, exhausted by the long journey. Upon reaching the shelter, he immediately set about setting up a simple camp. He tied the upper branches of several bushes together, creating a sort of frame. He draped spare thick hides over this structure. The result was a small shelter capable of providing protection from the direct wind and snow. It was a classic winter shelter of the peoples of the Great Plains. Starting a fire in such weather conditions proved to be a real challenge. The hunter used dry bark that he had been keeping tucked under his arm. It took him a long time to strike the necessary spark. Finally, a faint flame flared up, providing a saving and long-awaited warmth. He sat by the fire warming his hands, which had gone numb from the cold. Outside, the blizzard was gaining strength, howling through the bare branches of the trees. Snow quickly buried their makeshift shelter, providing extra insulation. Inside the hut, it became much warmer and calmer. The hunter pressed close to his companion, sharing what little warmth he had left. They were safely sheltered from the fury of the raging elements. The hunter realized that this standoff could drag on for a long time. He had almost no food left, and hunting in a blizzard was impossible. He took a philosophical view of the situation, accepting the will of nature. His mind remained calm and crystal clear. He simply waited for the elements to decide to change their harsh mood. What lies behind nature's beautiful picture can be merciless. The blizzard raged without stopping for 2 long days. During that time, the shelter was almost completely buried under a thick layer of snow. The hunter periodically cleared a small opening to let in fresh air. The fire had long since gone out, as the supply of dry wood had completely run out. The cold seeped through his clothes, causing his muscles to tremble involuntarily. His hunger had entered a new stage, turning into a dull, gnawing emptiness. His body began to draw on its last internal reserves of energy. The hunter tried to move as little as possible to conserve what little heat he had left. He sank into a state of light, salvific half-sleep. In this state, the line between reality and memories finally blurred. He saw before him the faces of his tribe's elders, telling legends. He heard the rhythmic beating of drums accompanying ancient rituals. These visions warmed his soul better than any real fire. He felt an unbreakable unity with his people. On the 3rd morning, the wind finally died down, and the snowfall stopped completely. With great difficulty, the hunter crawled out of his snow-covered shelter. The bright sun shone blindingly on the endless white expanse of the prairie. The frosty air burned his lungs with every deep breath. The world around him seemed frozen in perfect, glass-like silence. The hunter assessed his strength and realized it was running out. His movements had become slow, uncertain, and extremely clumsy. His mount also stood with its head bowed, exhausted from the long wait. The hunter approached and gently stroked its snow-covered neck. It was a gesture of farewell to the only living creature nearby. He decided to leave his companion in this shelter. The horse had a better chance of survival, foraging for grass beneath the snow on its own. The hunter himself decided to continue on foot toward the north. This was illogical from the standpoint of mere survival, but he was not following logic, but the call of his ancient heart. He walked through deep snow, leaving an uneven furrow behind him. Every step came at the cost of incredible willpower. His gaze was fixed ahead on the distant blue mountains. He did not look back, having let go of his earthly past forever. This journey was his personal rite of passage into another world. The landscape around him was incredibly beautiful in its harsh coldness. The dazzling white snow concealed all the unevenness and imperfections of the earth. Nature had created a perfectly clean canvas for his final journey. The hunter felt himself to be a part of this great and silent picture. Did he realize that this was his last day? In the next chapter, you will learn how he found his perfect resting place. The snowy plains seemed endless and completely still in the frosty air. The hunter continued his slow journey, measuring the distance with his own steps. His breath escaped his mouth in thick white clouds of steam. His body was working at the limit of its physical capabilities, having exhausted all reserves. Yet his mind remained surprisingly clear and calm. He no longer felt the cold, which had been replaced by a strange inner warmth. This was a sure sign that his body was ceasing to resist the frost. The hunter knew these symptoms from the stories of old experienced hunters. He accepted this state without the slightest fear or regret. It was a natural process of returning to the bosom of the great outdoors. There was not a single sound around him except for the crunch of snow under his feet. This silence did not frighten him, but rather lulled his weary mind. He stopped thinking about the reservation, the restrictions, and the new laws. Only images of the boundless, free prairies remained in his mind. He had finally cast off the burden of a world imposed by others. Toward evening, he approached the foot of a small rocky hill. The hillside was sheltered from the wind by large granite boulders. The snow here wasn't very deep, forming flat, smooth patches. The hunter realized that this spot was perfect for a long rest. He slowly climbed the slope, choosing the most sheltered spot. He sat down on the ground, leaning his back against a huge cold rock. From here, he had a magnificent view of the long path he had traveled. The entire plain lay before him as clear as day, illuminated by the setting sun. The pinkish light reflected off the snow, creating an illusion of warmth. It was the best possible ending to his long and arduous journey. The hunter closed his eyes and took one last deep breath. He felt no pain, no fatigue, no agonizing hunger. Only absolute calm and oneness with the world around him. He had become part of the land he loved so dearly. His soul dissolved into the cold air of the Great Plains. The sun disappeared behind the horizon, painting the sky in shades of dark blue. The first bright stars appeared in the sky, illuminating the snow-covered earth. The figure of the man by the stone remained sitting, completely motionless. He looked as if he had simply fallen asleep after a hard day's work. Nature carefully covered him with a fresh layer of fluffy snow. This day became the last in his earthly human history. He departed quietly, without disturbing the harmony of the world around him. His act became a silent hymn to the passing era of the great hunters. He remained undefeated, preserving his true inner freedom. Ahead lay only eternal peace in the embrace of his ancestors. 2 days after his disappearance, the hunter's absence was noticed. Quiet, anxious whispers began to circulate throughout the reservation. The missing man's mother remained silent, telling no one about their farewell that night. She knew her son had made a conscious and correct choice. However, the camp administration was concerned about the violation of strict rules. A small search party was formed to find the missing rule breaker. It included both guards and several experienced Lakota trackers. The trackers were reluctant to act, unwilling to pursue their own brother. They understood the motives behind his actions better than any of the officials, but the order was strict and they were forced to obey. The group set out to the northwest, trying to find any clues. A recent heavy snowstorm had made this task nearly impossible. A thick layer of snow had completely concealed any possible tracks. The search turned into aimless wandering through a vast white desert. The guards quickly lost their enthusiasm in these harsh conditions. The trackers, however, relied on intuition and knowledge of the hunter's habits. They speculated on the route he might have taken. They checked deep ravines and wind-sheltered forest areas. In one such spot, they discovered an abandoned makeshift shelter. Nearby were fresh tracks from the vehicle he had left behind. The guards took this discovery as a sign that the search would soon be successfully concluded. However, the trackers interpreted the situation quite differently and more deeply. They saw a single human footprint leading straight into the deep snow. They realized that the hunter had voluntarily deprived himself of any chance of returning. His path had become a one-way ticket. The team continued along this uneven, snow-covered path. Their progress was extremely slow due to the harsh weather conditions. The cold restricted their movements, and the wind swept away fresh tracks right before their eyes. The men were exhausted, losing their last reserves of physical and mental strength. With every kilometer, the hope of finding the man alive was rapidly fading. The search team leaders began discussing the possibility of returning to base. The risk of losing the entire team in a blizzard was becoming too high. However, the trackers insisted on continuing the journey for at least one more day. They felt that the solution to this mystery was very close. They were driven by a sense of duty to their tribesmen who had gone into the prairie. On the evening of the 7th day of their journey, the weather began to turn again. The sky was overcast with clouds, foreshadowing another heavy snowfall. The party set up camp in a low-lying area, sheltering from the biting, icy wind. The men sat around the fire in a somber and gloomy silence. Everyone understood that tomorrow they would have to turn back empty-handed. On the morning of the 8th day, the sky unexpectedly cleared of dark clouds. The bright sun illuminated the endless, snow-covered expanses with a cold light. The search party began to break camp. The commander made the final decision to end the futile search. Advancing further into the plains was deemed too dangerous. One of the trackers decided to take one last look at the surrounding hills. He climbed the nearest hill, peering intently at the white horizon. His trained eye caught an unnatural detail on the slope of the neighboring hill. A small dark spot was visible among the gray granite boulders. The tracker immediately called the rest of the group. The party slowly approached the indicated spot, wading through deep snow drifts. As they drew nearer, the contours of the dark spot became increasingly distinct. At the foot of a large rock sat a man, lightly dusted with fresh snow. His posture was relaxed and, surprisingly, completely natural. It seemed as though he were simply resting after a long and arduous journey. The trackers were the first to approach the motionless figure of the young hunter. They immediately realized that the man had long since left this material world. An expression of absolute peace and deep serenity was frozen on his face. There were no signs of struggle, suffering, or agonizing fear. He had departed just as the great warriors of their glorious past had departed. The reservation guards stood aside, maintaining an awkward and heavy silence. They had expected to see a victim of circumstance, a frozen and frightened fugitive. Instead, they were confronted with the grandeur of the human spirit. This silent protest proved stronger than any of their strict laws. The prohibitions lost their power in the face of eternity. The trackers did not touch the body of their departed brother. According to ancient customs, a man must remain where he met his end. This place became his personal, sacred, and inviolable burial mound. They merely said a quiet prayer, addressing the spirits of their ancestors. Their words dissolved into the cold air of the endless plain. The party turned and silently set off on the long journey back. Each carried within them the weight of what they had seen on that clear winter morning. This story quickly spread throughout the vast reservation. The young hunter's act became a true legend among his people. He proved that freedom cannot be confined within invisible borders. The hunter's mother listened to the returning tracker's account with stony composure. She never once wept or showed her boundless grief. She knew that her son had found what he was seeking on this expedition. His spirit now roamed freely across the endless plains of the eternal hunt. His memory remained forever in the hearts of all future generations. The events of that autumn in 1889 left a deep mark. The name of this young hunter was not preserved in the dry, official documents. To the reservation administration, he remained merely a nameless violator of strict rules. No one bothered to record the details of his quiet and solitary escape. The bureaucratic machine simply wrote him off from its endless ledgers. However, in the oral tradition of the Lakota people, his image lived on. The elders told this story as an example of unyielding inner will. He became a symbol of an entire era that was irrevocably fading into the past. His act embodied a farewell to the former way of life, a free, nomadic existence. It was not merely a death, but a conscious, cultural manifesto. Changes on the Great Plains continued to gather relentless momentum. Reservations grew smaller and smaller, while laws became stricter and harsher. Traditional hunting and gathering vanished completely, supplanted by agriculture and ranching. People were forced to adapt to completely new, alien conditions of existence. The old skills of the trailblazers were forgotten, having become utterly unnecessary in the new world. But the memory of the last hunter helped preserve national pride. In the hardest times, people recalled his calm, serene face. He proved that a person always has the right to make their final choice. This thought gave them the strength to endure the humiliations and hardships of life on the reservation. His spiritual legacy proved stronger than any physical barrier. Historians still debate the exact motives behind his solitary journey. Some consider it an act of desperation, driven by hunger and severe deprivation. Others see a deep religious and philosophical subtext in it. But for the Lakota themselves, the answer has always been crystal clear and simple. He went where his soul could breathe completely freely. The place where he found peace had long been considered sacred. No one disturbed his sleep in those distant, snow-covered rocky hills. Nature itself became his monument, changing its colors with every season. In winter, the snow covered him with a pure white, protective blanket. In summer, the wind sang songs to him in the tall green grass of the prairie. His story teaches us how important it is to stay connected to our roots, even when the whole world around us is changing and shattering our familiar foundations. True freedom is not found outside, but within every thinking person. This solitary journey became a great lesson for many generations of descendants, a lesson in dignity, courage, and boundless love for one's native land. We conclude our journey into the history of this quiet yet great tragedy. This story shows that sometimes the most significant acts are performed in complete solitude. They require no audience, no grand words, or noisy public approval. All that is needed is a firm conviction in one's own righteousness and loyalty to one's beliefs. The memory of such people lives on longer than any official record. We have seen how one person's personal choice can reflect the pain and hope of an entire people. This silent departure became a powerful symbol of the twilight of the era of the open prairies and the beginning of a new, difficult chapter in the history of Native Americans. The hunter, whose name remains unknown, proved that the spirit cannot be confined within borders if it yearns for boundless open spaces. His story reminds us of the importance of tradition, the power of silent dignity, and that true freedom always lies within us. What other untold stories do you think the Great Plains hold? Suggest topics for future videos you'd like to see on our channel in the comments, and be sure to subscribe so we can uncover new chapters of the past together.